So now that we know how to work with array lists and list views, we're going to put that knowledge together with what we learned about seek bars in the previous section to create a times table app. So the idea here is that if you've got a young child who is learning their times tables, then you could give them this app or use it yourself to generate the first 20 times tables to display those to the user. So I'm going to show you what we're going to make. And this is it. We're going to have a slider along the top or a seek bar along the top. And then when you update the seek bar by dragging it back and forth, you get the appropriate times table. And notice we're not particularly interested in the 0th times table, so I've stopped it going there and it minimizes out at the first times table. So that's what we're creating. I definitely think you have all the skills to make this yourself, so do your absolute best to do that. I wish you the best of luck. Go for it. All right, I hope that went well. I'm going to start, of course, by creating a new project. I'll call it times tables and all the defaults. And I'm going to create the slider first and then the list view so that it nicely appears underneath the slider. So let's get rid of our Hello World text view and then bring in our seek bar. Here we go. So I'm going to make it the same width as the parent. So that should stretch it out to the full width. Fantastic. And then all I'm going to do is change the ID. And because this seek bar is going to keep track of which times table we're on, I'm going to call it times table seek bar. Quite tricky to see all of that. I'll just try that again. Times table seek bar. There we go. I just want to capitalize the S. All right. And while we're here, we'll add the list view as well. So just underneath the seek bar. There we go. And by default, it's going to stretch out nicely. So once again, I'll just change the ID to times table list view. Smashing. So let's deal with our seek bar first and make that interactive. And then we'll work with the list view. So let's find it first off. So seek bar, import that. Times table seek bar. And we're going to want to cast it to a seek bar. And we'll get it using find view by ID, resources.id. Times table seek bar. And while we're here, I think I'll create the list view as well. Kind of makes sense to put the two together. So this is going to be a list view, find view by ID. We should be pretty good at this by now. Times table list view. All right. Now I want my times tables to go from 1 to 20. So let's take our times table seek bar and set the max to 20. Great. Unfortunately, there's no set min method to set the minimum, so we're going to have to add some code in manually in our on progress changed method to put in our minimum. I would like to set an initial value though, and that we can do very easily using times table seek bar set progress. Remember, progress is what we use to refer to the value of the seek bar. If you think of it as a progress bar going from left to right, that makes a bit more sense. So we're going to start in the middle with a progress value of 10. Now we'll set our methods. So times table seekbar dot set on seekbar change listener. So remember, this sets up a listener which will call the methods within whenever the seekbar is updated by the user, or indeed by our app as well. So we're going to want a new on seekbar change listener. Gives us all that lovely code. We're going to ignore the on start tracking touch and on stop tracking touch methods because we don't need to do anything there. We only need to do something when the progress is actually changed. And this is where I'm going to add in my code to set the minimum. And I'm going to do this in a more general way so that you can use this code whenever you want to have a minimum value in your seekbar. So we're going to have a minimum of 1, and then we're just going to check if progress is less than 1, then we want to actually essentially use a progress of 1. So what I'm going to do is bring in another variable called times table, which is not going to have a value initially, but if progress is less than, sorry, by 1 I mean the minimum to make it more general. So if progress is less than the minimum, we're going to set times table equal to the minimum. Otherwise, we're going to set times table equal to progress. So hopefully that makes sense. We've got a minimum here that we could change to any value, and we've got a times table which is going to be the name of the times table that we're going to use. And then if the progress turns out to be less than the minimum, then we're going to set times table equal to a minimum. So you can use that whenever you want a certain minimum value to be used within your seekbar. So for now, we'll just log the seekbar value. Let's import that. And remember, we're going to log times table. And we do that using integer.toString and then times table. There we go. So worth running the app now, I think. If we've done everything right, we should see that the progress is in the middle of the seekbar. So, and initially has a value of 10, and then when we drag it up and down, we'll see in the logs that the value goes all the way up to 20, but only down to 1. Here we go. Yep, so our value is nicely in the middle, and then as I drag it up, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, all the way up to 20, and then drag it all the way down, and it stops at 1. Fantastic. One small thing there, you might be thinking that you don't actually want the seekbar to go all the way down to 0 when your value is 1. That's fairly easy to fix. We just update the seekbar when the user tries to drag it down and set it back to 1. So we can do that using times table seekbar dot set progress again to the minimum. So let's just have a quick look and make sure that that works in the way that we want it to. The user should now not be able to drag it all the way to the left. Here we go. So I'm dragging, and there we go. I can't drag it any more to the left. Great. So now we've got our seekbar up and running. Let's get our list view in place. We definitely don't want it there. Down here. So let's start with a times table value of 10. which we're going to need to because our seek bar is initially on 10, so it's going to be confusing if we start with anything else. So we'll have a times table value of 10. So now to create our times table, we're going to create it, of course, as an array list. And I want an array list of strings, even though they're going to be numbers, because I'm going to be displaying them on the table. So we're going to convert each of our integers to strings before we put it in the array. I'll call it times table content, and this is a new array list of strings. There we go. Now we need to add the content to our array list, and I'm going to do that using a for loop. Could use any kind of loop really, but I think for makes the most sense here. So we'll start by creating our counter variable I, which is going to have an initial value of 1. We're going to keep going as long as I is less than or equal to 10. If you want to display a longer times table, you can of course just change that to 20 or something, but I'll leave it as 10 for now. And then each time we want to increment I by 1, which we do by I++. All right, now we've got our for loop. So all we have to do in each round of this loop is to add an item to times table content. So times table content dot add, and then we want to add I times table. So that will give us the number that we want. So when I goes from 1 to 3, then in this case we'll get 1 times 10, 2 times 10, 3 times 10, etc., which will give us the 10 times table. If we change that to 9, then we would get 1 times 9, 2 times 9, etc., which would give us the 9 times table. So that's all good, but this is going to be an integer, so we need to convert it to a string using integer.toString. And then the thing that we want to convert to a string is I times table. So this will give us the times table in the format that we want, which is a string. So all that remains is to add this content to our list view, which we of course do with an array adapter. So we're going to create an array adapter of strings, and we'll call it array adapter. And this is going to be a new array adapter of strings with a context of this, a type of android.r.layout.simple list item 1, and then we're going to get it from times table content. And then all we need to do is apply that to our list view, which, if you remember, was times table list view. So we'll set the adapter to be array adapter. So let's just check that that works. We should now have, well, we do have a slider that works and returns the correct value. We should have a table that shows the first 10 items in the 10 times table. Of course, our final change will then be to actually update the table when the slider is moved. Here we go. So fantastic. So our slider is looking good. Our times table is looking good. We can of course scroll that up and down. And our slider still hopefully returns values to the logs when we move it. Let's just take a look. There they are. Brilliant. So now we just need to update the times table when we move the slider. So one option there would be to copy and paste the code for our times table production to where the seek bar value is updated. And that would be fine, that would work, but we don't really like duplicating code because then we have to update it twice, etc. And it just looks a bit messier than it has to. So instead of that, I'm going to cut that code and then create a method So public void, because it's returning nothing. I'll call it generate times table. And it's going to need an integer, which will be the times table that's actually being generated. There we go. Then we can paste that code in. And now we don't need to create that each time because it's going to be passed to the method by the script that calls that method. And that's a very good point here. So times table list view, we can't access that in our method up here because it's created in our onCreate method. So that's simple enough. We just need to create it outside here in the class. And then here we'll just set its value in the onCreate method. Okay. So now we just need to call that method down here. So generate times table with a times table of 10. And then here, instead of logging the value of the seek bar, we want to, of course, generate the times table. And the times table that we want to generate is times table, which is essentially the value of the seek bar, as long as it's one or more. All right, so fingers crossed, the app should now work exactly as we want it to. So when we move the slider or the seek bar back and forth, it should update the contents of the table with the appropriate times table. There we go. Fantastic. So if you've got a kid who's needing to learn their times tables, this app might work very well, both for you and for them. I hope you enjoyed that. Let's now go on and move away from list views and onto timers.